All right, have you ever been having some kind of an emotion and somebody basically told you that you needed to just get over it? Have you ever actually believed this person and felt like you needed to just get over it? I'm going to go on a bit of a rant about this, as well as why it's really not just as easy as just getting over it on the strength. If you can relate to this, hopefully you will find this a little bit validating and maybe even a little bit liberating. Alright, so there's something about emotions that people tend to think they are really easy to just control, manage, or really easy to just get over, right? So people tend to be pretty unforgiving about other people who have, say, anxiety if that person themselves has not had that anxiety. So if somebody else has a feeling, it can be really easy to just be like, hey, get over it. Or some of my other personal favorites, it's all in your head. This is how I manage my stuff, so it will work for you too. It's in the past. Move on. I got over it, so can you. You are overreacting. You're imagining things. You're being dramatic. We tend to be sort of bad at handling other people's emotions for them, especially if we haven't experienced that particular emotion. I see this happening a lot with clients, so that's why I'm going over it today. This can actually be really pretty damaging from what I found, especially if they have a good relationship with the person who's telling them, in essence, just get over it. Okay, if something fits in the emotional scheme of things, we tend to feel like we should always have just as much control over that as we do over other physical things like muscle soreness or fatigue. And at the same time, if we can't get over something emotionally, we tend to not be as forgiving with people as we would be if, say, they needed to get over a broken leg or a cavity or something along those lines, right? So if somebody has generalized anxiety disorder, it's easy to want to dismiss that, say it's all in your head, or any number of other invalidating things. Whereas if somebody has a broken leg, we would never be like, hey, you know what, rub some dirt in that, get back up and run that marathon. Or if somebody needed a root canal, we would never be like, hey, you know what, just kind of get over it, move on with your life, you'll move past it. No, it actually takes some help. It takes something beyond ourselves. Usually takes a professional to deal with. If it's a broken leg, it's not as easy as just walking it off. If it's a root canal you need, it's not as easy as just brushing your teeth a little bit better. It's a bit late for that. So if something is emotional, we tend to want to be like, yeah, just get over it. But if it's purely physical, we have a bit more empathy, right? The fact of the matter is, I think we're looking at it all wrong. In some ways, it can be helpful to look at it like, well, emotions are actually physical. They're physiological. When I'm feeling anxiety, something's going on in my body. My amygdala up here on either side of my brain are firing a lot more frequently, a lot easier, a lot more intensely, and for a longer period of time than somebody else who's not having anxiety. It's a physical thing. It starts, it lights up my nervous system. That nervous system connects to all these places in my body on the way down, and it has certain effects. I feel anxiety from that. It's a very physical thing. But we don't tend to look at it that way. We tend to say, okay, it's all in your head, or mind over matter, or some of these other things that do work in some situations, but we'd be making a mistake to say they work in all situations. So in understanding emotions in ourselves, in our loved ones, and other people we know, it can be a lot more accurate, and it can help us have a lot more empathy to look at it like this isn't just an in your head thing. It's actually a physical thing. It's a physiological thing, like a broken bone or a cavity that needs a root canal done. Because it is, basically. If I'm feeling an emotion, it's because something's happening in my body. Now, I think a lot of the people who say these invalidating things are probably really well intended. They want to see their people get better. If they feel like they've done something to help themselves get better, they automatically feel like it's going to work for somebody else. Whatever. Point being, they want to see people get better. And so that's why they say some of these invalidating things. Problem is, it can be pretty harmful. I think it can be useful to remember if somebody's feeling an emotion, usually a good reason, and there definitely is something physical going on in the body. It's not just an in your head thing. So next time you are feeling some kind of a hard emotion, whether that's anxiety or depression, frustration, anger, sadness, anything else, can be useful to remember to try to give yourself or your loved ones some leeway, almost as much as you would if, say, they had a broken femur with a cast on their leg. You wouldn't expect them to get up and run a marathon. You would expect them to work through it slowly and at their own pace. Or if, say, somebody had a huge cavity and needed a root canal done, and they needed to go to a professional, not forever, just for a time, to get some treatment, and then maybe some tips on how to brush their teeth better or whatever, and then they can move on. It can be helpful for us in having empathy for them to look at it more in this sense. Not as easy as just getting over it. It's going to take several different steps and maybe even professional help. Now, to illustrate this point, really awesome book that I just read recently on a recommendation is QB, My Life Behind the Spiral by Steve Young. So I didn't know this at all. I used to love watching Steve Young throw deep bombs to Jerry Rice way back in the day, but I had no idea that this whole time he was dealing with some really intense anxiety. So Steve Young, one of the greatest quarterbacks ever, Hall of Fame quarterback, struggled with really intense anxiety. Wasn't a matter of just getting over it. This is clearly a disciplined man who has control over his body, has control over his mind, and he struggled with intense, often debilitating anxiety. In addition to being, Steve Young, he also got a law degree from BYU, which is no easy degree from a demanding college. So if he could have just gotten over his anxiety, he definitely would have, because the stakes for him were really high. So his journey through anxiety was really actually pretty fascinating. It started as separation anxiety as a child. Separation anxiety is really not that uncommon. So he has this anxiety, it's debilitating, he has a hard time leaving home and being away from his parents, which became a problem as he got older and needed to leave home. This became a huge issue when he started looking at going to college to play for some prestigious college teams. He thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to leave my parents. I'm not going to be able to go to college. Now, backing up just a bit, by this point, his separation anxiety had evolved into something else because it was untreated. It evolved into something that his therapist called situational anxiety. So his anxiety became very specific to playing football, but not just to playing football, to the anticipation of playing football. Once the game started and he was on the field, he was good to go and it was completely gone. In all of the situations in life, wasn't all that anxious, including while he was getting a law degree from a major university, in between seasons of being the 49ers quarterback. So no small feats that he was accomplishing, no anxiety around law school, other areas of his life. It just became very specific to anticipating playing a football game. Meanwhile, this whole time, he really doesn't even have words to describe what's going on with him. He feels like he needs to just get over it. Anxiety treatment and awareness was still evolving. We didn't have the same awareness that we have today. He didn't know what it was. That added an extra layer of whatever was going on with him. He felt like he just needed to get over it. He felt like it was a character flaw on his part. He didn't look at it like it was something physiological going on in his body, just as if he had tooth decay that was developing into a cavity. And unfortunately, because he thought it just meant something was wrong with him, he felt like he needed to just get over it. He couldn't express what was going on to his family, couldn't convey it to his family. His family was going, all right, man, we're here for you, we support you, push through it, you'll get through it, which is well intended for sure. It's just not good treatment for anxiety. So finally, somebody forces him to go to a therapist. He goes one time, feels like it's not useful, and he stops going. Until a long time later, and after suffering a lot more from anxiety, somebody else convinces him to go. He finally goes to a different person, and this other person gives him a name for what's going on, and he gives him words to understand it, and he helps him explain what's going on in his body for it, and he helps him to understand some of it's genetic. It's a combination of the genes you got from your mom, genes you got from your dad. It's not just you playing games in your mind. And it gave him words to convey these things to other people. So suddenly he no longer feels isolated, like he's the only one dealing with it, like there are no words for it, like it's just in his head and he just needs to get over it. He has a better understanding of anxiety. and one that relates more to his body, to his genetic, to what he inherited from his parents. So huge breakthrough for him to understand it differently, to have a better understanding versus the old school way of just get over it. From that point, he had a major breakthrough. You don't get over it quickly. It definitely took treatment, and it took behavioral changes and thought changes, a lot of things. But that started him on the right path to where he was able to liberate himself from this once debilitating anxiety. And this is Steve Young we're talking about. Now, these are pretty extreme examples, but it's useful to look at some people who seem superhuman in some ways and to realize they are, in fact, just human like the rest of us. And if we're dealing with anxiety, we're not less than human. We're not less than the other people. We're all on the same level. We're all just humans, for better and for worse. Oh, and if you're interested in this book, I'll put a link to it in the description. Really good book, whether or not you like football. Now, to take this and move it to what I see with clients on a regular basis, a lot of times people are suffering from some of the same things that Steve Young was suffering from. They have a limited understanding. They think they're the only one. They think it's all in their head. They need to just get over it. And it can be really useful to help people understand it's not just an emotional thing that's in your head. It's a physiological thing. There are reasons you're feeling this way. It needs to be treated a certain way. And that doesn't mean just getting over it. And to take the fact that his separation anxiety evolved into what his therapist called situational anxiety. What I see happening is a lot of times clients will have anxiety, and that's one thing. That's his core problem in the middle here. But then what happens is we build an extra layer on top of that. So for Steve Young, it was separation anxiety, which evolved into this situational anxiety. For a lot of us, we start with some kind of an anxiety, but that's made worse by thinking it's all in our head, thinking everybody else is handling it better than we are, thinking we just need to get over it, but we're not, thinking I'm the kind of person who's not strong enough to deal with this stuff that's just in my head. To well-intended family members or loved ones telling us you need to just get over it. So our anxiety can start out small and then evolve into something bigger. This is our anxiety, and then this is the relationship we have with that. It can be helpful to shrink this up by acknowledging the fact that, okay, there are physiological reasons why I have this, right? I don't need to beat myself up thinking it's all in my head. It's physiological to a degree. I'm not the only one dealing with this. A lot of people do. The fact that this is painful and I'm not getting over it quickly, that's pretty normal. It's how it goes. A lot of times people need professional help. Having a more realistic understanding of anxiety can keep it from turning into this huge thing, and instead remaining a bit more realistic. Like, yes, I have anxiety. It takes these special considerations. It limits me in this way. It gives me strength in this other way. It's not a character defect. It's just the way it is. It's a better relationship to have with it. So there are some of my thoughts on getting over anxiety on the strength. Sometimes that's doable. Other times it's not, and it takes quite a bit of help, and that's normal as well.